اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا وهدى وتقى يا رب العالمين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك رب أن يحضرون. تبرأت من حولي وقوتي واعتصمت بحول الله وقوته ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. Indeed, all praise for Allah. We praise Him, we seek His aid and ask for His forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil within our own selves and from the consequences of our sinful deeds. Whomsoever Allah guides, the dead done, who can misguide, and whomsoever He allows to go astray, due to the person themselves turning away from the guidance after it has been presented to them, then there's no one who can guide that person to the straight path. And I bear witness and I testify before Allah and then before all of yourselves that there's no being that's worthy of our absolute devotion and absolute love and absolute reliance except Allah alone, having no partners. And that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam is Allah's slave and final messenger. The best speech is the book of Allah, the Quran, and the best guidance is the guidance of the Nabi al-Mustafa alayhi salatu wasalam. To proceed, the title of tonight's discussion relates to the famous hadith of Nabi al-Kareem alayhi salatu wasalam, where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he informed us in this magnificent hadith about the seven sort of people, the seven people who will have the shade of Allah the day when there will be no shade except for His shade. The Prophet ﷺ says, سَبْعَةٌ يُظِلُّهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي ظِلِّهِ يَوْمَ لَا ظِلَّ إِلَّا ظِلُّهُ. That there will be seven kinds of people on the day when there will be no shade except for His shade. Now, just to put this into context, it's important for us to remember a separate hadith which almost gives us a window into understanding and appreciating the reality of what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is saying here. In a separate hadith also narrated in Sahih Bukhari, known as the hadith of Shafa'ah, the hadith of prophetic intercession. Intercession is of two sorts. The first is a Shafa'at al-Udma, al-Kubra, the major Shafa'ah. And then there's the minor Shafa'ah, the minor intercession. The minor intercession refers to when a person is, the people are in paradise and hellfire, and actually someone who is close to you, for example, might wish and plead and petition Allah Jalla wa'ala, saying, "Oh Allah, Abid, he did this or that for me, or he was such and such. Please spare him from the penalties of the fire." That's Allah Hafiz of Salam. Or Abdullah was like this, or Zayd or Fatima, and we ask Allah's protection thereby. And the person then, either the punishment of the hellfire or the duration of the hellfire is lessened, is shortened. How? By this shafa'atul sughra, the minor shafa'ah. But even bigger than that is the shafa'ah, the intercession, to trigger the beginning, the commencement of the Day of Judgment itself. So the Prophet ﷺ said, on the Day of Judgment, we'll all be resurrected. And the state of us being resurrected, the Prophet ﷺ said, that يُحْشَرُ النَّاسِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ عُرَاةً غُرْنًا. He said, حُفَاةً عُرَاةً غُرْنًا. They'll be resurrected naked, barefooted, and uncircumcised. And no one will be able to look left or right because of the huge preoccupation, the mental preoccupation and concern, the anxiousness of what's going to stand before them in terms of their judgment, whether they'll get their book in their right hand or their left hand. And then the Prophet ﷺ says in the same hadith of Shafa'ah that the sun, the sun will be brought close to us on that day. And he says the distance between our heads and the sun will be a mil. A mil, the Arabic word for mil, has two meanings. Either it means the stick that's used to put kuhul in the eyes. So that's that far, taqriban, approximately. Or the other meaning is that it's a mile. Either way, we know this much from our own understanding of the world and how it operates. That if the sun was at all, even a few centimeters closer than what it is right now, life would cease to exist as we know it. In fact, we'd probably disintegrate. On that day, no one will be able to just simply disintegrate. And the sun will be brought closer. Either this meal or that meal. It's not even that relevant. It'll be hot. And some will be sweating, perspiring, losing water from their body out of this huge stress on that day, and some will sweat up to their ankles, some up to their knees, some up to their waist, and some up to their shoulders and almost drowning in their sweat. And some will literally be, they won't be even able to swim through their sweat. This is the reality of the Day of Judgment. And the Prophet ﷺ said, every person will be saying, Nafsi, Nafsi, myself, myself. Until the people go to the Prophet Adam ﷺ saying, can you intercede before Allah? And they go prophet by prophet up till they go to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he will then go into sujood. And stay in sujood for as long as Allah wishes. And he'll praise Allah, bimahamida, with praises which Allah has never been praised with before. He'll praise Allah with those praises. And then Muhammad will hear the invitation from Allah. Ya Muhammad, irfa' ra'sak, was'al tu'ta, washfa' tushaffa'. O Muhammad, raise your head, ask, and your request will be granted. Seek intercession, and your intercession will be given. And then the Day of Judgment will begin. That day is an immense day, with scenes of people literally turning their hair, young children, their hair will turn, or a youngster, a young man, their hair will turn, grey, out of the concerns of that day. And people sweating and up to here and here and here, and some fainting. And under such circumstances which, subhanAllah, we see scenes nowadays in our street, and it's so shocking for us. Yet these scenes will be far even more unimaginable. We can't actually imagine it. We just try and get a sense. And under such circumstances, there will be a certain set of people who will have the shade of Allah. They will not be feeling that heat. They will not be sweating like that. They will have amnesty and safety given to them. Who are these people? For if we have true Iman in this day, then we cannot but make it our business to know this. If we said there's only going to be 7 types of people, I'll give you a crass example, forgive me. I believe yesterday there was a budget that was read out. Not to make this political. If you believe that definitively only 7 people will make it through that budget, and everyone else, Allah will go bankrupt, you'd be immediately turning the pages to find out. I don't mean major and minor wins and losses. It's all or nothing. We would be opening this and we'd know it. And once we read it, we wouldn't almost forget it, because our livelihood rests on it. This is a far greater, deeper reality. نسأل الله العافية والسلام. We ask Allah for His safety and well-being. And so there's 7 people. It says سبعة, 7 people. What it means is 7 types of people. سبعة أصناف من الناس. There's 7 types of people who will have that safety, will have the shade of Allah. This shade is referred to سبعة يظلهم الله في ظله, in His shade. His shade means it's nisbat للتشريف. When something which is physical and created is attributed to Allah, it means that thing is being attributed out of nobility, out of it being a prized possession. So when you have the masjid being referred to Baytullah, the house of Allah, it doesn't house Allah. A'udhu billah. It means it's a magnificent, glorious entity. And it is worthy of being called the house of Allah. Though every house, all houses are not our houses in reality, are they? They're just lent to us by Allah. We didn't really do anything to earn it. we work, but He is the one who enables us to work. We looked for the house, but He's the one who gave us the permission to have that contract go through. And we'll live, and then we'll die, and they'll pass on, and then we meet our children. And maybe if He wills, a'udhu billah, it might not even reach them. And if it does, it's ours for a finite. Our possession is very temporary. Our possession and ownership is very temporary. He is the true owner and possessor. But on that day, this shade is attributed to Him because it is something so immensely valuable. And these 7 people, we should make it our business to know it, to internalize it, and to make it our life's mission to be the person who has these traits, one or more of them. And also to understand the broader message that the Prophet ﷺ wants to teach us about what sort of person you need to be, I need to be, if we're going to be successful. The first is known as Al-Imam Al-Adil. Al-Imam Al-Adil. Adil literally translates as the just Imam. First thing I want you to understand is that equally the word of Adil that this means these are the best of Imams, right? And they have this quality of being upright and just. They are not dictated by their whims, their desires, or their fleeting, transient emotions. Like one of us, we get upset, we get annoyed, we might get angry, we might even make decisions in haste. That stability is somewhat lacking, that foresight is not there. And actually, even subhanAllah, not a small point, our transactions, our dealings with one another are so often based on what is in it for me. In fact, I'm told that even in workplaces, there's some workplaces you go to, and actually they teach you and they plaster on the wall a card or a poster saying WIIFM. WIIFM. What is in it for me? Is that the case? You've heard of this? Then what's in it for me is the mindset you're taught to just think things through. Nasallallahu if you're in a position of influence or decision making, of power, and you're always going to think about with self-interest, then you have actually fallen short of what the amana was in your hands. However, the problem is what? It's actually the base nature of the human being is to think through those lenses. For many people, I don't want to say most, maybe even most. Moreover, if you have cultural practices in various societies where they actually will encourage you, saying, what's in it for me? And actually you're told, I don't mean the scientific theories and the like, but in essence, survival of the fittest. And if you don't look out for yourself, then who will? And families, Muslim families, even sometimes telling their children this. And sometimes, with some due measure, there is some regard that needs to be given to your own needs. Your body has a right over you, your family does, etc., etc. But if that becomes the sole prism and the overriding prism, and then even positions become positions utilized for one's own benefit, then there's a problem. That person is not actually executing their duties in a way which is in line with their amana that's been invested in them. And so this introductory comments about Al-Imam Al-Adil should almost immediately lead your mind to understand the conclusion I'm about to share with you right now. This Imam is not the Imam who leads the Salah. Right? He may have some of those might be relevant to the Imam who leads the Salah. This is the one who is ultimately the leader of the people. And of course that leadership then, it devolves down to subsidiary officers. Sometimes back in the day, you'd have a situation where you'd have one leader, the kind of Amir al-Mu'mineen, right? And has influence over the treasury, has influence over this, over that, executive decisions, and the like. But then it's got devolved. So now some of that responsibility, that adl, that responsibility, that justice, that uprightness is required in all of those different domains. And this is something which we need to see. Are we being dictated by our base instincts, our emotions, or self-interest? Is it for Allah? And the only way to really ensure that one is not governed by one's own emotions and instincts and base responses is to always ask yourself, are you doing this for Allah? And to probe oneself regularly and test oneself within reason, with proper measure for that respect. But think also why the ultimate, fullest guarantee. I mentioned it applies to all those devolved and then some devolved, some, as it goes down the food chain. But the highest office, al-Imamatul Uzma, the reason why it's so significant, and this will be reflected in some of the other ones as well, the 7 times, is who is there. Imagine, just think about it for a second. If you had Umar al-Khattab, and now when I give his example, it seems very remote and very distant. He is Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sure, he can say, if you see me do something wrong, you let me know. But when you have the Amir al-Mu'mineen, he's the head of the government, head of the state. No one can really, let's say even some of the Abbasid Khulafa or the Umayyad Khulafa, these sorts of individuals would have such power and influence and funds that no one really, they're not scared of anyone. The police is not going to be able to really track all of their activities, especially back then, you can imagine, right? So they can't be tracked, they can't so easily be held to account, they can rig the system, and yet they chose the higher course, the higher road, the way that is in accordance with what is truly upright and just. It's literally, even though it's out in the open, it's the closest you can have at such a high, influential, impactful office, because you have decisions that affect other people. Your decisions affect other people. And so this person, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنْ هَوَى, the one who had the conscience and the fear of their standing for Allah. That accountability and that sense of accountability helped them sidestep the hawa, the base desire of being self-interested. This person has the shape of Allah. And I think, and I know this is not, it requires some discussion, perhaps in the Q&A we can open this up. I've spent time on this one, even though it's perhaps the least relevant for many individuals. They feel that. But actually, number one, it is relevant. Everyone is, many of us will be fathers. Many of us will have positions of responsibility. Many of us have amanat, trust, vested within ourselves. We have to try and execute that in a way where it's not just reactionary based on our emotions and our instincts, or pandering to whoever it is that we're in charge of. We always see it first through the lens of what is Allah's expectation of us. That's not always easy, it's quite hard often, but its reward is immense. And the common denominator is always, are you doing that action, which could even be a dunyawi engagement, but you're keeping Allah in mind, and you are really trying to clear up the inner space, your heart and your mind, from the base influences when they kind of start controlling you. Rather, you're not controlled by this. You can discipline it for the sake of Allah. The second one, very interesting, is, and by the way, I'm going to ask you what these are, the 7 are after, so you have a vested interest to do as our brothers to write it down, or to try and stay alert. Second, شاب نشأ في عبادة رب. A young man, a young person who grew up with the obedience of Allah in their lives. They sought, even at the peak of their hormones and their energies, and the opportunities and the invitations to do all sorts of questionable and haram things even. They chose the path of obedience to Allah. They aligned themselves with their higher potential. Allahu Akbar. You know, it's been said in some of the earlier texts that actually, indeed, Shaitan feels even scared of a youth who remains moderate and on the path, but is not one given to just following his base desires or her base desires. Because this person has true strength. They have the power of Allah in their heart. The power to override their base tendencies. And if they can do it at that stage, inshallah, they will be able to do it in subsequent stages of their life as well. And we know many scenarios and stories of those who managed to do this, and what glowing success we saw from them as they grew older, and those who didn't, and the concerns. And then we have a third type who didn't, but Allah still enabled them to make tawbah and catch up later on. But you know what? Is it going to be like the one who really had the benefit of all these years to use it in truly constructive, wholesome, uplifting, rightly guided, enlightening, illuminating ways that attracts the barakah and blessings of Allah? So shabun nasha fi ibadati rabbih. And for your information, when the hadith mentions shab, the scholars of Islam, they say that in Islam, a shab, a youth, or shabah, means a female youth, refers to anyone up until the age of 40. So maybe there'll be some who think, you know what, maybe did I miss my window? If you manage to get there before you're 40, you still have an opportunity. And the extent, but don't be one of those who's not 40 and thinks, you know what, I'll do it as I in that last couple of years. Because really you need to try and capitalize on the opportunity right now. And the more you have of it right now, the more you will see the afterglow of that into post 40. You know, there are some people who Allah blessed. And no matter, even if you're on this path where you're practicing before you're 40 and on the deen properly, through your teens and whatnot, you will always feel the sense, I wish I actually was more aligned. Because you will be able to see those who are more aligned, more clear, more focused in the reality of this life. They achieved a certain win, a certain bounty, a certain prize, which you can almost never catch up with. These are the youth who learnt the Quran at a young age. They became fluent in its reading, in its recitation. It became their source of sweetness. Reflecting on it became the thing that gave them this buzz, for want of a better word. They were keen to learn the meaning of the Arabic language itself. They admired scholars the way that others admire, I don't know, celebrities and the like. People who just have that kind of fizz, which comes and goes. They had that clarity. You know, and you see some of the youth, they were the giants of Islam until today. We remember them. Remember this, what I'm about to say to you right now. It's one of my most prized realities in when I think of life. That Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah, a shab, a young man who grew up in the obedience of Allah. Imam Malik, a young man who grew up in the obedience of Allah. You know, both of them, just ala sabil mithal, by way of example, they were actually persecuted and really given a tough existence during certain stages of their life by the rulers of that time. But if I turn to any of you right now and ask you, who was the Khalifa at the time of Imam Malik who did that? Would any of you know the answer? The Khalifas at the time of Imam Bukhari or Imam Ahmed who did this to them. You will barely know the answers. The 3 or 4 Khulafa at the time of Imam Ahmed. But Allah made these people's names, they lasted because they started young and they were true. They remained consistent. Wallahu hasibuhum. Allah and Allah knows best. So this is a youngster who grew up in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thirdly, and I'm going to move on a bit more swiftly now. The Prophet ﷺ then says, he says, وَرَجُلٌ قَلْبُهُ مُعَلَّقٌ in masajid. His heart, a man or a person whose heart is attached, connected, suspended in the masjid. Meaning you come to the masjid and really you leave, but the experience of salah. Remember the word masjid, where does the word masjid come from? I'm sure many of you know the answer. It's not a trick question. Masjid comes from the verb sajda, to make sujood. It's a place of sajda. So almost the fact that the salah is so much a prized experience in your life, that really when you go into salah and you leave and you honor the salah so much that you want to pray the salah, not even though you could pray it at home, you chose the masjid, the jama'ah, and you chose the masjid to make it the most complete salah. And the love of that means that even when you leave it, it's as if you left your heart in the masjid. One salah goes, you go off, and you're looking forward as you leave tonight to tomorrow's salah. It means so much to you. Of course, tomorrow's not guaranteed for any one of us, to any one of us. But that's the sense of anticipation. That person, if you like, their salah is so, I'm sounding almost like I'm describing something very foreign to ourselves, but so sweet that actually such a person, just imagine, start with this outcome. Try and inculcate that love for the masajid in your heart. Try and inculcate the love of the masajid in your family members and friends and community members' heart. And understand what the ultimate success from that will come. The guy who has that, who actually leaves the mosque and leaves with the sweetness of the masjid still in his heart outside the masjid, is his behavior outside the masjid going to be like the one whose heart, when he leaves the masjid, or if he attends the masjid at all, it's not really like, oh yeah, I was at the mosque, now I'm back to normal. This person, he or she has embarked on a path, on a journey of masjid orientation that now is orienting their life. It's now transformative. It's transformative. I spoke about some of this last week, about Ramadan being transformative for us. The masjid becomes transformative of your life. It's not because you have an amazing speaker or sheikh. Actually, you take ownership of that transformation within yourself. You stop, you meditate, you reflect, you think very carefully. What is it in life that will actually last? What are those things that come and they go and they don't give you any promise? And actually, this is going to count. The first thing I'll be asked about on the Day of Judgment and in the hereafter will be my salah. And I want it to be right, I want to be in the right place. And so your heart remains in the masjid, as if in the masjid when you leave. Fourthly, and very closely connected to the third, رجلان تحابا في الله اجتمعا عليه وتفرقا عليه. Two people, two men, who loved one another for the sake of Allah. تحابا في الله اجتمعا عليه وتفرقا عليه. Two people who loved one another, their relationship with one another is founded on a godliness, a God-centeredness. Means, and I can't tell you, and I think those who are slightly older will perhaps be able to speak about this far more clearly and eloquently than I could ever. In fact, let me pause for a second and ask you all a question. What's your experiences, brothers? I'll just choose those who are immediately in front of me. Do you think when you experience a relationship, do you find most people to be, as I mentioned earlier on, that they're just very selfless? Or do you find that life tends to be people filled with more people who are focused on, what's in it for me sort of thing? What's your experience, brothers? You can tell me, please tell me that, alhamdulillah, most people are quite selfless and it might be that that's your case. And I tell you, if you say that, we're going to be benefiting as well, and I'll tell you how. So don't worry, there's no wrong answer.
Yeah, no, I thought that from my experience, going around so many different masjid, most people, I would say, are selfless.
Are selfless.
Yeah.
Okay, so Zafri says, in his experience, most people in masajid, you say?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. But do you think most people in life,
It's 50
outside of Islam, Muslims and non-Muslims,
It's more or less
Definitely.
50-50.
are
Different.
different?
Yeah.
So the point is, life tends to throw into people's lives a dynamic where you can end up looking transactional. Okay, I'm doing this for that person, what are they doing for me? And this is a very unhealthy dynamic. Sorry, I want to take that back and correct it. It's necessary to a point. That your basic needs you try and look after. So if you're if someone was a green, grocer, right? Then you sell and you expect and you need some barter, give and take. However, to make that the basis of your life and the basis of your dealings becomes a big problem. And actually, even alhamdulillah within masajid you see the opposite, where people are willing to be giving without expecting it. But even there, brothers, I have to tell you, there's a big risk, in my opinion, that there'll be sometimes someone, a donor, who just gives a huge amount, but then wants something or the other. You have masajid, and this is not to say it's not permissible, where you have the building boards, and if you donate, then you can have your name put up on the wall, right? Ultimately, that's between them and Allah, and them putting their name on the wall does not mean it wasn't for the sake of Allah. It's not directly. It might be to encourage people, or this, they can have something, it's possible. But the point is that actually the human nature is looking, what do I get in return? The sense of delayed gratification. You're doing it and you don't need anything right now, and you get your return in the hereafter. It's something tough for many people, most people, maybe all of us. The idea to give, and never to get. So I will always be giving you a link, but never on the one time I need a help, you can't. Is that eventually going to have some sort of that? These two people who have the shade, that's not what governs their relationship. On the contrary, they're willing to do the following. They will say, you know what, you have a need, before you even need it, I will look to anticipate it and fulfill it. These are two people who are there for the sake of Allah. They're not looking at what's in it for me, they're looking how can I take care of the other person. They are their brother's keeper, their sister's keeper. This is what builds communities. It's what builds the attraction towards the places of Iman. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, so we mentioned so far, Al-Imam Al-Adil, the upright, just Imam. We mentioned the youth who is on the obedience of Allah. Then we said a person, two men, the man whose heart is attached to the masjid. Fourthly, we said two people who love one another for the sake of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ said, the people who are like this, they will be on pulpits of light on the Day of Judgment. All the other awliya of Allah will always envy them. They wish they could be like them. Who are these people who have these filled with nur? It will be these two people who had their relationship for the sake of Allah. They're reminding each other how they can be better, how they can learn, how they can do more ibadah, how they can fulfill each other's needs without even expecting anything else in return. They lived like that and they passed away like that. اجتمع عليه وتفرق عليه. And then the Prophet says, وَرَجُلٌ, he says after that, the person who is invited to وَرَجُلٌ, that is called da'atu, by a person of standing and beauty. So for a man, he's invited by a woman of incredible beauty and has some authority, sway over the direction of his life. And yet, because she's not halal for him, he says, Inni akhafullah. He's able to override that base tendency, either of self-preservation and being intimidated, or overwhelmed by the beauty. No one would find out. No one would see. As far as he can tell at the time. But he says for the sake of Allah, either verbally or by his own inner self, saying, no, not at all possible. I am Allah's slave. And actually, so is that person. And I will stay contained within the limits of Allah. Now imagine, someone else, no one else would know. Moreover, this other person, this lady, or this man, depending on, they have both influence and beauty. So the reason for being invited, the appeal is there, potentially from a dunyawi angle, And also, if anything, your fate you feel could be jeopardized by, say, it's that remaining principle. The only driver which truly can come in that circumstance, not right now, but in that circumstance, is going to be the awareness and consciousness of Allah. And then the Prophet said, and those who've read the story of the three, again in Bukhari and Muslim, the three people who were trapped in the cave, one of them was in a converse situation to this. But again, it was the fear of Allah that helped them stop. And this was a source of their success in this world, even before the hereafter. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, the person who gives in charity with his right hand or her right hand, such that their left hand is the iman. Again, as I said to you, that quality of ikhlas, of sincerity, giving and not looking for any recognition, not hoping to kind of say, remind people of one's favors, right? Not even saying to yourself that, you know what, yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm not doing well, or I'm doing well in my career, either way. And, but alhamdulillah, I'm giving in charity at least. So hopefully I'll get some help from Allah. That's potentially reminding yourself, if you need to remind yourself that you will be helped by Allah in return, to encourage yourself to learn generosity, fine. But actually, this person, they gave and they forgot. They gave and they gave without being calculated. I don't mean you have to make yourself a bankrupt or anything like that. But you had the capacity on some days to put your hand in your pocket and not even look what's there and put it in the way of goodness. Not being so calculated. I'm not saying being spendthrift, I'm not saying give everything, but not always counting the pennies, because you just have this, you've now risen to a higher level. And you don't look back, you move on. That's the person who's now, he has learned, or she has learned to, if I tell you frankly, they've learned to tame their minds, to direct their minds and their emotions and their instincts in a direction which is positive, constructive, conducive. Not, as I say, just this way or that way, but they do it for the sake of Allah. And then, lastly, I've got my eye on the time, I'm going to have to speed through, is the person who ذكر الله خاليا ففاضت عيناه. The person who was on their own. And subhanAllah, Ramadan is coming. And this is a really important one. Because a lot of ibadah, the way that people tend to do it often, is they tend to pray their tarawih in Jama'ah. There's difference of opinion among scholars where is the best place to tarawih, etc. It's not a significant conversation right now. You're on your own. You need some time on your own in Ramadan. Before the suhoor time, etc., etc. I don't mean you have your suhoor on your own, but I'm saying to you, you have some time on your own. And you remember Allah. And at some instance, you remember Allah in privacy. And then that causes your eyes, the water, the tears to shed from your eyes out of remembrance of Allah. That person who had that genuineness even in their tears, means it's a depth and genuineness. The emotion is real. It really, the person can't contain himself. The tears just come through. And there's no reason for that. It's not because there are lots of people, kind of the energy of the room prompted it. Not, of course, to show off, a'udhu billah. It was genuine, it was individual, it was direct, and it transformed their state of being. This person, again, has the chance, inshallah, to have the shade of Allah on the day of judgment. The day when there will be no shade except for His shade. So, if I summarize, these individuals have various differences between them. One's an imam, as in a huge, either a leader, be that in a family or community, or the head of state. Another one is just, he's got someone of the opposite gender just, in charge of their state. Means almost the opposite of the head of state. He's actually, even within the family or the community, he's not that guy. But he can be, he has others in charge of him. Another person is just a youth, and another two people are just two people who meet one another, and another is a person who just comes to the masjid. These are very diverse in their lifestyles, in their walks of life, but the unifying factor is that they're able to override this instinct that would most ordinarily come to them by keeping Allah in their mind and remembering in that challenging circumstance. And that is the outcome we want from Ramadan itself. We want to be people who learn taqwa, who graduate from the college of taqwa, from the institute of taqwa, of fasting, who really, at the end of the month, we have that prize, that certification from Allah that we are from the muttaqun. And we have to make dua constantly to Allah that He makes us from those people of taqwa. And we should make dua also that He makes us from the people who have His shade, the day when there's no shade except for His shade. And there'll be others, aside from these seven, as I said, in the interest of time, who will also have the shade of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ said, the persons who, gave charity, you will be in the shade of your charity on the day of judgment. The Prophet ﷺ also mentioned that the memorization and the enacting, the memorization, the understanding, and the enacting of Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran will be shades on the day of judgment. Right? So learning these also matters. And because these surahs combine and contain most of the guidance, that really, if you get that, you've got a huge chunk of the guidance. So these are there, and the point is there's others in addition to the seven. So make dua that Allah makes us from the people of the shade on the day when there's no shade except for His shade. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على
Sheikh Abid,
نعم تفضل.
really I give him more importance when you see to give a speech. I remember around the year 2008, we meet mosque in the South Hall. 2008.
Okay.
When, if maybe I mistake that time, but that clearly you are. And when I was in the mosque, you come close me and you say, I want to learn the deen.